Hi everybody, I'm Dennis Daly. I spent 20 years with United Press International, most of it with the old UPI Radio Network. And my favorite assignment was going on the road producing and hosting American Montage. It was an hour-long weekly program. Now here's an edited version of one of those shows.
And they had to pledge allegiance to a flag that they no longer were a part of.
Hi, everybody, and welcome to this week's American Montage. We are standing in front of the Alamo, that historic structure in downtown San Antonio. American Montage had not been to San Antonio before, and because this month is the anniversary of the Battle of the Alamo, I thought it would be a great time to go down, not only to sample the great weather and the food, but also the hospitality and the wonderful, rich history that this part of the world has. Ann Burney is one of the hostesses here at the Alamo. I asked her to tell us the story to kind of put the whole event into perspective.
The Spanish explored Texas in the 1500s, and they claimed it for Spain, but they decided at that point it wasn't what they wanted to develop, so they left it alone. The French came in the 1600s and established a settlement down on the coast. At that time, the Spanish got a little bit upset about it, and they were looking for where the French settlement was. When they finally found it, it had burned to the ground. So they decided maybe we better do something with Texas. And they built 5 missions right here in what we call present-day San Antonio in the early 1700s. This one here at the Alamo was called Mission San Antonio de Valero. It moved around several times when it was still in the thatched hut stage, but when they started to build it in stone, they began it in 1724, and they started the convento first because that's where the friars lived, and then they built the church. Later on, the Indians that had been educated in the Spanish ways and converted to Christianity, they began to die off, and by 1793 this mission was secularized. It wasn't used as a church anymore. Actually, the church part wasn't ever really used as a church, but the mission itself was not used as a mission. The Spanish army used it as a garrison for soldiers that they sent up here to protect the settlers from the hostile Indians that were in the area, as well as to guard the friendly ones.
You know, one of the things I want to point out here, talking about dates, is a lot of people who are from the East Coast fail to realize that even at the turn of the century, coming into the 1800s here, that there was a great part of what was to become America that was still very unpopulated. And if you look at the date of the entry, I mean, we have, what was it, Arizona, I think, was admitted to the Union after 1900. We tend to think of all of this as having always been here, but this was a fairly isolated area back then. Oh,
yes, it was virtually empty. When Mexico got her independence from Spain in 1821, several years later they came up with a good constitution, the 1824 Constitution. Under this constitution, the Mexican people had liberties and freedoms they'd never had before. And this government was a fairly liberal government, but they were worried about the encroachments of foreigners on this empty territory. So what they decided to do was to commission impresarios, or land contractors, to bring in colonists to settle here and become Mexican citizens. And if your family qualified, if you were of good moral character and so forth, they weren't looking for jailbirds. But if your family qualified, you could get a league and a labor or a labor of land, and that was a package of land that was in excess of 7 square miles, and that's why they came.
This is reminiscent in a way of homesteading that we saw on the plains.
Very, very much so, yes. Under this setup, these people came in from not only the United States, but they came in from Europe as well. And they lived under this Mexican government. Now, when Santa Anna was elected the president of Mexico in 1833, he decided to consolidate his power in 1835 by dissolving the constitution they lived under. And the rebellions took place all over Mexico. It wasn't just Texas. It was in Zacatecas and in the Yucatan, in Guadalajara, in Tampico. All these places organized armies to go up against Santa Anna.
Well, now, it would seem, if you had people coming in from Europe and various places, that early on you had a very diverse population here ethnically.
Oh, yes. Yes, they came in from quite a few different places. Santa Anna sent his brother-in-law to San Antonio to put down the rebellion here. While he was here, he took this old abandoned mission and he beefed up the outer walls of it, and he tore down what was left of the roof of the church in order to build a cannon ramp to the back. Now, later on, after the Alamo fell and all of the men here were killed, Santa Anna left some of his troops here, who stayed here for a few weeks. When they found out later on that they had lost the war, well, of course, they had to go on back to central Mexico, and they destroyed the outer walls as much as possible so that it wouldn't be used as a fort anymore, and that's why it's much smaller now than it was then.
What is it like for you, a member of the Daughters of the Republic of Texas, to look at this building? The plaque out front says this is really the cradle of the Republic of Texas. We do not have enough time here to go into how many different flags and different forms of government you had here in Texas, but to know that you're showing people around a spot which ranks in places in the country among those very few places where an idea started. I was talking to a friend of mine on the plane. We had both seen the Liberty Bell recently, and I mentioned I almost started crying when I saw the Liberty Bell. I just wasn't ready for the experience. What's it like to be a part of this and tell that story to other people?
Oh, it's really a thrill at times. There are people that are here that come. They realize that the Alamo belongs to them too. Hispanic ladies and people from New York and people from Connecticut. They didn't all have Southern accents here, you know. Mm-hmm. They came from everywhere.
What about tourists from overseas? Do they understand what's happened here? Do you have to tell them the story? What is their reaction?
Many of them are familiar with the story. They've seen John Wayne's movie, so a lot of them come because they've heard of it that way. And a lot of them do like it. They're used to having very historical places in small areas. A lot of theirs had the encroachments of civilization overlaying the original area, like what do you call it, the forest, Sherwood Forest, where Robin Hood was. It's virtually non-existent anymore.
Well, you go to see the Great Pyramids in Egypt, and there's a 4-lane highway that runs right in front of them. It just destroys the whole image of what you thought you were going to see when you get there.
Well, you sort of have to piece it out in your mind, or get a bird's eye view with a model or a diorama in that sense to get a feel for how it was. You
have a lot of students come through here, a lot of school tours?
Oh, quite a few, yes.
What kind of questions you get asked?
Oh, gee.
A little bit of everything?
A little, yes. Where did Davy Crockett die is one. Where did Travis draw the line?
Where did Davy Crockett die?
Davy Crockett died somewhere between the front door and the gate to the present courtyard.
This was really a fight to the death here, in the true sense of the word, wasn't it?
Yes, and I think that's what takes people and really turns them upside down. The thought that there was a little band of men who had ideas of honor and loyalty and freedom that were so important, a sort of a Sir Walter Scott attitude, if you will.
I guess the bottom line is the event that happened here at the Alamo. What did that make possible? What was the result of that causes us here 100 and so years later to memorialize this?
This little group of men were, many of them were quite well known where they came from, and it was really a shock to people to realize they had been massacred like they had. There were a lot of educated men that were here, especially for the time. There were 6 doctors and 4 lawyers here, 1 ex-congressman, 1 nephew of a former president of the United States, James Madison Rose, whose uncle was the framer of the American Constitution.
Thanks a lot.
You're welcome. Thanks for being here.
And there you have it, another edited episode of one of the American Montage programs prepared for the UPI Radio Network back in the 1980s and 90s. I'm Dennis Daly. Thanks for listening. Thanks for going with me this week. And check YouTube for more American Montage programs.